A Russian court has sentenced American journalist Evan Gershkovich to 16 years in prison. It comes after the Wall Street Journal correspondent was convicted of espionage in a closed-door trial. Gershkovich was taken into custody last year while on a reporting trip in the country. Our Briar Stewart reports.
As
the judge read out the verdict, Evan Gershkovich stood in the prisoner's box, appearing thinner but calm. The Wall Street Journal reporter had to have known it would likely come to this. Russian courts almost always convict the accused, and trials for espionage are held behind closed doors until there's a verdict. The prosecutor said the court established that Gershkovich was working for the CIA when he was gathering information about a Russian tank factory.
Evan!
From the moment Gershkovich was arrested in 2023, the Wall Street Journal and U.S. officials decried the charges, declaring him wrongfully detained. They described his trial as a sham. Gershkovich's trial was supposed to continue next month, but his defense team pushed to move it up, and that has some hoping that there may be momentum for a prisoner swap.
I want to think it's a good signal.
Sonia Groisman used to work with Gershkovich in Moscow and has been corresponding with him while he's in prison.
Even if we all knew it's gonna happen, when I was looking at it, I was like crying because it's just surreal.
Russian officials have previously said that there can only be exchanges once there's a verdict. 4 months after U.S. basketball player Brittany Griner was convicted of drug smuggling, she was traded for a notorious Russian arms dealer.
We're working it as we speak, and we're not going to stop until we get Evan home, we get Paul Whelan home.
Whelan is a former Marine and also a Canadian citizen.
The prisons here are very, very different than the prisons at home.
This spring, he called CBC News from a penal colony. He was also convicted of espionage and has been imprisoned for nearly 6 years. During this whole time, he's been holding out for some kind of deal. And now officially convicted, so too is Gershkovich. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
My next guest says a prison transfer for Gershkovich will likely not come anytime soon. William Pomeranz is a senior scholar with the Kennan Institute. He joins me tonight from Washington, D.C. Mr. Pomeranz, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
What went through your mind when you heard about the conviction and the sentencing?
I thought it was going to happen. I didn't think there was any chance that he would be acquitted, and I believed that he would get a long prison sentence, which he got.
Russia intentionally has very broad definitions of crimes like espionage. Explain that for viewers at home and how that factors into this case, which I know some people have said this is not really a real case.
So they have very general definitions of a lot of major criminal offenses. So it allows prosecutors to have a lot of flexibility when they indict and prosecute. So it is notorious in the Russian criminal system that the prosecutor has all the advantages in a case, and the defense counsel has very limited ability to sway the judge or actually make a case.
Vladimir Putin hinted several months ago in an interview that he did with Tucker Carlson when he traveled over to Russia that Gershkovich could be freed in a prisoner swap. What would it take for a swap to happen?
It would take the ability of the United States to have someone to swap with Gershkovich. And right now, there are not any major Russian convicts in the U.S. criminal system. So when you talked about Brittany Griner,
right,
there was an exchange between Griner and a notorious arms manufacturer and smuggler. We don't have the similar case right now. And so we would have to find out who the Russians would take and whether the U.S. and its allies would be able to actually bring this person for a hostage. And that would require some other country to allow to be engaged in the swap as well.
So beyond a prisoner swap, with diplomatic relations being what they are between the United States and Russia right now, are there any other levers that the White House can pull here?
I don't think so, no. Unfortunately, all the leverage is with Vladimir Putin, and he will set the timetable as to when and under what conditions a prisoner swap would happen. And Vladimir Putin doesn't have any real reason to do it quickly. I think Vladimir Putin would want to get the best deal possible, but I fear that he would ask kind of unreasonable demands, such as the lessening of US and European sanctions. And I don't think that the US is going to actually do that just for a prisoner swap.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that, because how do you think Russia's ongoing war with Ukraine factors into the possibility of Evan Gershkovich's release?
I think it makes it even more difficult than previously, because Russia is now engaged in a 3-year war in Ukraine, and Russia doesn't want to actually be perceived as willing to negotiate. Indeed, Putin's negotiating stance is that Russia gets everything and Ukraine gets nothing. So this is a very hardened position from Vladimir Putin, and it makes any sort of negotiations very difficult unless the United States is willing to give something of great interest and importance to the Russian Federation.
So and you might not be able to answer this question, I won't blame you if you can't, but how do you see this playing out in the next months or years even?
Well, I fear that it could potentially drag on for months, because I don't think Vladimir Putin is in any hurry to make this prisoner swap or exchange. So I think Vladimir Putin and Russia has all the cards, and Vladimir Putin will basically define the timetable for any sort of prisoner release. And that also means that the U.S. has to find someone of potential value that Russia wants to exchange Gershkovich for.
Mr. Pomeranz, appreciate your time and your analysis tonight. That is William Pomeranz, a senior scholar with the Kennan Institute.